Get off your knees! Stop acting like dirt belongs to you.
I'm only making sure no one gets hurt.
You always make a mess of everything. You should not have to do that alone. You don't have to solve every emergency alone. Finally sees you. This is not a misunderstanding. This is theft.
I wasn't weak. I was busy surviving.
There are concerns about your behavior, Hannah.
You let me believe you were just another traveler.
Hannah Miller kneels barehanded on the empty airport lounge floor, gathering shattered glass before a wandering child can step on the razor shards. Her posture, a silent hymn to survival despite the exhaustion carved into her delicate features. Darren Blake strides forward, his polished exterior gleaming under the harsh lounge lights as he snaps at Hannah. "You did this. You always make a mess of everything," his voice dripping with the venom of a man who wields humiliation like currency. The well-dressed stranger with tired eyes watches from across the room, his gaze fixed not on the broken glass but on the woman still kneeling, her resilience painting the silence with a kind of quiet majesty that makes him forget every reason he came to the airport tonight. Hannah lifts her head slowly, her bright hazel eyes meeting Darren's without flinching, her voice steady as she corrects. It was the passenger. "I'm just cleaning it up," her refusal to bow a silent rebellion against the system designed to keep her on her knees. Darren smirks, savoring his moment, and delivers the cruelty with calculated precision. "You're on your knees anyway. That's where people like you end up," the words landing like a whip designed to scar in silence. Hannah remains kneeling, her posture unbroken, her exhaustion softened only by the loose blonde ponytail framing her face, the image of a woman who has spent years shrinking herself so others can breathe easier, yet refuses to shatter. Miles Carter's coffee cup hovers near his lips as he studies her, his expression unreadable. But his eyes betray the weight of recognition, a woman who moves through the world with no expectation of praise, much like the mother he lost, whose memory still haunts his controlled calm. Darren escalates the humiliation, accusing Hannah of carelessness and deducting the cleanup cost from her wages in front of the remaining staff, ensuring every word echoes like a slap that leaves no one untouched by fear. Hannah rises slowly, her movements deliberate, her face a mask of quiet dignity, but the injustice burns in her chest like a flame fed by years of borrowed money, unpaid hours, and the weight of being too tired to fight back. She points toward the bar, where a camera looms overhead, and says quietly, "There was a camera over the bar. You can check it," her voice steady, a lifeline thrown into the storm of Darren's manufactured chaos. Darren's jaw tightens, his face twisting into a mask of rage as he snarls. "You think I answer to you?" The question hanging in the air like a challenge to a woman who has spent her life answering to everyone but herself. Miles watches from the corner, his fingers curled around the paper cup, his expression unchanged, but his eyes darken with something deeper than observation. He sees the woman who does not plead, who does not cry, who simply absorbs each blow and keeps standing. After Darren storms away, Miles crouches beside Hannah and picks up the glass shards she missed. His voice low and measured as he says, "You should not have to do this alone." The words a quiet promise that cuts through the hollow silence of the empty lounge. Hannah offers a tired smile, the kind that comes from a soul too weary to trust kindness too quickly, and replies, "It's just part of the job," her voice barely above a whisper, carrying the exhaustion of a woman who has spent years turning pain into motion. Miles counters, his tone firm and unyielding, "No, it's part of the abuse," the words striking like a match in the dark, illuminating the truth Hannah has spent years trying to ignore. Her silence has been mistaken for consent. Hannah finally looks at him fully, her hazel eyes searching his face not for the watch, the suit, the air of power, but for the sadness sitting quietly behind it, a loneliness so deep it has become part of his expression. Near closing time, a little girl's sobs echo through the terminal as she clutches empty space where her stuffed rabbit once was. Hannah kneels again, brushing dust from the toy before returning it to the child's trembling hands. The mother's tears of gratitude fall freely. But Miles watches from a distance, his chest tight with something he cannot name. A woman who cares for those who have nothing left to give her, a habit Darren will never understand. The next evening, Miles returns to the lounge, appearing like clockwork with a coffee he barely touches, his presence a quiet shadow that grows heavier with each passing night. He asks small questions that sound casual but carry the weight of intention. Do they always make you work this late? His voice calm, measured, designed to coax truth from a woman who has learned to lie with silence. Hannah answers without flinching, only when the schedule gets ugly, her voice steady, a woman who speaks in understatements, who has turned resignation into an art form. Miles replies, which seems to be often, the words hanging between them like a verdict, a man who understands that suffering rarely announces itself before it arrives. He watches her leave at the end of her shift, noting how she heads straight to a night pharmacy, her steps hurried, her purpose clear, picking up medicine for her 7-year-old daughter, Evelyn, whose bright eyes miss nothing. One storm-lashed night, Hannah's car refuses to start in the parking lot, the hood raised like a plea for help, her daughter asleep in the back seat, the gas gauge hovering on empty. Miles happens to walk out at the exact wrong moment, his presence a silent offering, his black car gleaming under the rain-slicked lights, too expensive for her comfort but infinitely safer than pride. Hannah refuses at first, her voice trembling with the effort of maintaining dignity, but when Evelyn stirs in the back seat, she accepts the ride, her silence a surrender born of necessity. Inside the car, Evelyn curls against the seatbelt, half asleep, as Hannah apologizes for the mess of car seats and snack wrappers, the blanket worn thin by years of use, her words a reflex, a habit of apology learned in a world that demands it. Miles meets her apology with quiet defiance. You keep saying sorry for things you shouldn't have to apologize for. His voice cutting through the clutter of her explanations, a man who understands that kindness should never feel like a debt. Hannah looks out the window, her reflection fractured by the rain-streaked glass, and says, "It's easier than explaining them." The words a confession of exhaustion, a woman who has spent years translating her life into silence to spare others the weight of her struggle. Days later, Miles appears at Hannah's apartment building with a reusable grocery bag overflowing with milk, eggs, fresh fruit, and cereal Evelyn likes, his presence a quiet invasion of her carefully guarded solitude. He says only that he bought too much and would hate to waste it. But Hannah's instincts scream caution as she asks, "Why are you doing this?" Her voice steady, her eyes searching for the trap hidden in his kindness. Miles doesn't answer immediately, his silence a pause stretched thin between them, before he finally says, "Because I know what it looks like when a person keeps carrying too much." The words striking Hannah like a blow to the chest, a man who recognizes her burden because he has carried one of his own. When Darren, trying to impress a visiting executive, casually refers to Miles as Mr. Carter, the name lands between them like a bomb, Hannah's face freezing mid-motion as the truth unfolds. Miles Carter, the owner of Carter Aviation and Hospitality Group, the corporation about to absorb the lounge contracts. "You're the owner," she says, her voice sharp with accusation, her posture rigid with a weight of betrayal. A woman who has spent years being invisible only to have her world crash into focus around a man she never suspected. Miles doesn't deny it, his expression calm, his voice steady as he admits, "I wanted to see what my company really looks like before the reports get polished." The words a confession of espionage, a man who came not to observe but to witness the rot festering beneath the surface. Darren's face pales, his confidence crumbling like drywall under pressure, realizing he has exposed himself in front of the very man who could dismantle his empire with a single signature. Later, in the empty lounge after Darren's temper has faded, Miles finally tells Hannah the truth. His mother worked airport cleaning when he was a boy, bringing home napkins and schedules because she thought paper with logos looked almost fancy, her memory a ghost that haunts his controlled existence. Then he delivers the second truth, his voice low and measured. "I've seen you before. Not personally, but in records." The words a sentence handed down from a court she never stood in front of, her complaint about missing overtime pay buried before it reached the right desk. Hannah stares at him, her hazel eyes wide with shock as she whispers, "Why would anyone bury a complaint from me?" The question hanging in the air like a plea for a world that makes sense. Miles looks toward the lounge doors, his voice heavy with the weight of discovery. Because someone here didn't want the books looked at too closely. The word's a verdict. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. The next morning, Darren summons Hannah to a small office near the service corridor, his face arranged into a mask of fake concern as he slides a folder across the desk and says, "There's been a report," his voice dripping with the venom of a predator who has just cornered his prey. He tells her money from the lounge drawer has gone missing, that cameras caught her in the back room after closing. The accusation, a noose tightened around her neck. A woman who has spent years surviving one humiliation at a time. Hannah's voice is immediate and firm as she denies it. That's not true. Her denial a lifeline thrown into the storm of Darren's manufactured chaos. A woman who has learned the hard way that silence is not always the safest answer. Darren folds his hands, his smirk a weapon as he says, "Then you'll have no problem explaining it to HR." His voice a promise of punishment, disguised as procedure, a man who understands that systems are designed to break those who dare to question. He slides a printed sheet across the desk, a grainy screenshot of Hannah leaving Miles's car the previous week, below which a handwritten note claims improper contact with a vendor representative, the evidence a lie crafted from whole cloth. Hannah feels something cold move through her chest as Darren's words settle over her like a shroud, her voice trembling but steady as she says, "You're making this up," the words a desperate attempt to hold on to the fragile illusion of control. Darren meets her denial with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "I'm documenting concerns," his voice a reminder that power thrives in the gray areas where truth and fiction blur beyond recognition. By noon, the lounge is alive with whispers. Half the staff believing Hannah has been getting special treatment from Miles, the other half convinced she has somehow caused trouble on purpose, their glances averted, their silence a verdict. She is suspended pending review, the humiliation hitting harder than the suspension itself, a woman who has spent years swallowing shame, only to have it force-fed back to her in front of everyone she once called colleagues. Hannah goes home and does not answer Miles's calls, her body shaking, with the effort of holding back the tears, her pride the only armor she has left against a world that has spent years trying to strip it away. When Miles finally stands outside her apartment building, she opens the door only enough to see him, her voice a blade honed by years of survival. "You should leave," the words a warning, a woman who has learned that trust is a luxury she cannot afford. Miles meets her warning with calm defiance. "I'm not here to hurt you," his voice steady, a man who understands that intentions mean nothing without actions to back them up. Hannah's voice is sharp with the weight of past betrayals as she counters. "That's what men say right before they do." The words a shield forged from the ashes of every promise broken, every kindness weaponized. Miles flinches, but only a little, his voice softening as he says, "Darren set you up." The words a confession. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Hannah's voice trembles with the effort of holding back the tears as she says, "Of course he did. But people are already talking, Miles. The story exists now. I don't need another rich man standing in front of my door making my life complicated." Her words a rejection of the role of damsel in distress, a woman who refuses to be rescued by the very system that broke her. Miles repeats softly, "Rich man?" His voice a mirror held up to her prejudice, a man who has spent his life trying not to forget where he came from, only to be reminded of it every time someone sees him and assumes he has never known hunger. Hannah's voice is raw with the weight of her exhaustion as she admits, "You know what I mean," her words a concession, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. She is shaking, her body a storm barely contained, and she hates that Miles can see it, her vulnerability a weakness in a world that rewards hardness above all else. The worst part is that she wants to let him in, wants to believe he is different, but belief has cost her before, her voice a whisper as she shuts the door between them, the click of the latch echoing like a gunshot in the hallway. Miles does not walk away from the problem. He opens it, his journey beginning with payroll records and benefit contributions, his investigation a scalpel slicing through the lies that have festered for years. He uncovers the truth. Darren has been pulling money from employee assistance accounts and hiding it in inflated vendor invoices, the theft a violation that cuts deeper than the financial loss, a man who has turned the workplace into a kingdom of fear. The missing overtime complaints Hannah filed were not lost. They were deliberately rerouted, her name and several others kept off the escalation path, a system designed to ensure that the voices of the powerless disappear into the noise. Then Miles finds the deepest layer. Darren has been running a quiet side arrangement with a catering subcontractor, overcharging the airport for supplies and pocketing the difference, the corruption a cancer that has spread unchecked for years. To keep staff from asking questions, Darren has turned the workplace into a place of shame, his weapon not just theft but humiliation. A man who understands that control is easier when the controlled believe they deserve their suffering. The most painful twist comes from a file buried in a storage archive. Hannah's complaint was flagged by name months earlier because Darren recognized her from a previous incident involving overtime violations at another property. Her defiance not random collateral, but a target. Miles' discovery cuts deeper still. A note buried in a personnel bundle from years ago reveals that Hannah's mother once worked at the same airport. Her kindness to Miles' mother when she collapsed near a security checkpoint, a thread connecting their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The truth lands quietly but powerfully. This was not coincidence. It was the long echo of two working women who did what good people do in public places where no one expects to remember them. Miles arrives at Hannah's apartment that night with a stack of documents, no speech prepared, his presence a silent offering. A man who understands that some truths are too heavy to carry alone. Hannah opens the door and sees the folder in his hands, her body instinctively stepping back as if to shield herself from the weight of what is to come. Miles says simply, "I found it. All of it." The words a verdict handed down from a court she never stood in front of. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. He lays the records on her kitchen table, the benefit theft, the redirected complaints, the false vendor invoices, the ignored reports spread out like evidence in a trial, the truth too heavy to ignore. Hannah stares at the pages, her expression unreadable, her voice barely above a whisper as she says, "Do you know what's funny?" The question a prelude to a confession she has never dared to voice. She continues, her voice sharpening with the weight of vindication. "I kept thinking maybe I was imagining how badly they wanted me quiet." The words a testament to the gaslighting she has endured, a woman who has spent years questioning her own reality. Miles meets her gaze evenly, his voice steady as he says, "You weren't imagining anything." The words a confirmation of the nightmare she has lived. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Hannah's voice is raw with the weight of her exhaustion as she counters, "No, I was just poor enough that they thought I wouldn't matter." The words a verdict on a system that values wealth above humanity. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles says nothing because he knows she is right. His silence a confession of complicity, a man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Then Hannah looks up at him, her voice a blade honed by years of survival. "And you? Were you always going to tell me who you were?" The question a challenge, a woman who refuses to be a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. Miles admits softly, "No, I was going to see how the place worked first." His voice a confession of espionage, a man who came not to observe but to witness the rot festering beneath the surface. Hannah's voice is sharp with accusation as she counters, "Then you happened." The words a rejection of the role of damsel in distress, a woman who refuses to be rescued by the very system that broke her. Miles exhales, his voice heavy with the weight of his mistake. That's the wrong word. The admission a crack in the armor of control he has spent years forging, a man who understands that intentions mean nothing without actions to back them up. For a moment, Miles thinks she might send him away again. But instead, Hannah sits at the table and closes her hands around the edge like she needs the wood to hold her up, her posture a surrender born of exhaustion. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. The board meeting is held in a glass conference room overlooking the airport tarmac, the space a cathedral of glass and steel where power is measured in titles and the weight of silence is heavier than the accusations being leveled. Darren arrives confident, his charm a weapon polished to a razor's edge, still believing he can talk his way out of trouble. A man who has spent years surviving on noise and other people's fear. He does not understand that the room has already turned against him, the air thick with the weight of complicity and the unspoken understanding that some lines should never be crossed. Miles sits at the head of the table, his presence a silent judge, a man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Hannah sits near the back, not because she is afraid, but because she wants to hear every word before she speaks, her posture a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging, a woman who refuses to be a pawn in a game she never agreed to play. Miles begins by projecting the payroll discrepancies, the missing benefit contributions, and the falsified vendor charges onto the screen, the evidence a noose tightening around Darren's neck, a man who has spent years hiding behind procedures and polite smiles. He then plays the recordings from the lounge camera system, the audio a damning witness to Darren's crimes, the words snarled orders to alter reports and ignore complaints echoing through the room like a verdict. Darren laughs at first, his confidence a fragile thing that shatters under the weight of the evidence, his voice a desperate attempt to deny the truth. Do you know what this is? The question a plea for the room to believe the lies he has spent years crafting. Miles meets his denial with calm finality. Yes, it's theft. The word a verdict. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Darren tries to reframe his crimes as a misunderstanding, his voice a desperate attempt to rewrite history, but the room remains silent, the weight of the evidence too heavy to ignore. Then Hannah speaks from the back of the room, her voice never rising but cutting clean through the silence like a blade. No, it's what happens when you think people like me are too tired to notice. The word's a verdict on a system that underestimates the power of the powerless. Every face turns toward her, the room holding its breath as she stands slowly, her posture a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging. A woman who once cleaned broken glass in silence, now carrying the authority to make things better. She says, I filed a complaint months ago. It disappeared. He told me to stop asking questions. He told me I was lucky to have a job. He told me I was on my knees where I belonged. Her voice a steady stream of truth that refuses to be silenced. He thought that meant I was weak, she continues, her voice sharpening with the weight of vindication. I wasn't weak. I was busy surviving. The word's a verdict on a system that mistakes resilience for weakness, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. No one interrupts her, the room holding its breath as the weight of her words settles over them like a shroud, the silence a testament to the power of truth spoken plainly. Miles looks at the chair beside him where the HR director has already placed the termination paperwork. His signature, a final nail in the coffin of Darren's empire. A man who has spent years untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. He signs the papers and slides them forward, Darren's access revoked on the spot, the action a verdict that echoes through the room like a gunshot, the finality of it too heavy to ignore. Security is called, their presence a silent reminder that power is not absolute, that even kings can be dethroned, the men in uniform a bridge between the world of the powerful and the world of the powerless. The board members, who have been silent too long, suddenly find their voices and begin asking questions they should have asked months ago, their words a chorus of complicity finally breaking its silence, the sound a testament to the power of truth. Darren's face changes only once, when he realizes that his power has been borrowed all along, a man who has spent years wielding authority like a weapon only to be reminded that it was never truly his to hold. As security escorts him out, he turns on Hannah one last time, his voice a desperate attempt to wound her. You think this changes what you are? The question a final plea for the world to believe the lies he has spent years crafting. Hannah meets his gaze calmly, her voice steady as she says, No, it changes what you are. The word's a verdict on a man whose cruelty was the only thing that defined him, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. That is the moment the room breaks into applause. Not loud applause, but the kind that starts uncertain and grows because everyone can feel that something unjust has finally collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. Miles stands and looks at Hannah across the table, her posture a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging, a woman who once cleaned broken glass in silence, now carrying the authority to make things better. She does not smile right away, her face unreadable, her voice a whisper as she processes the weight of the moment. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles understands that, and for once he does not try to fix it. His silence a confession of complicity, a man who has spent his life untangling lies, only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. The company rewrites the lounge contract structure overnight. The change is a testament to the power of truth spoken plainly, the back pay, overtime corrections, and access to the benefits fund a lifeline thrown to those who have spent years drowning in silence. The employee complaint system is moved outside the local management chain. The reform a verdict on a system that valued power over justice. A man who has spent years untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Training becomes mandatory, audit trails permanent, and Darren's name is removed from every active record. The erasure a final nail in the coffin of his empire, a man who has spent years wielding authority like a weapon, only to be reminded that it was never truly his to hold. Hannah is offered a promotion to Employee Care Coordinator for the Airport Hospitality Division. The role a chance to make sure no one else disappears into a system the way she almost did. A woman who once cleaned broken glass in silence, now carrying a clipboard and the authority to make things better. At first, she refuses, suspecting charity, her voice steady as she says, "It's not charity." The word's a verdict on a system that mistakes kindness for weakness. A man who has spent years untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. She accepts only after reading the full job description twice, her posture a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. A month later, Evelyn stands in the doorway of their new apartment, her bright eyes wide with wonder as she stares at the sunlight streaming across the floor, the sight so ordinary yet so extraordinary in a world that has spent years making them invisible. Hannah smiles and runs a hand over the back of her daughter's head, her voice soft with the weight of the moment. "Yes, baby. It's ours." The words a verdict on a life rebuilt from the ashes of survival, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. The apartment is not huge, but it is clean, warm, and quiet, in a way that feels almost unreal: the bedroom for Evelyn, the second-hand couch, the real dining table, and enough pantry shelves to hold more than 1 week of food. The space a testament to the power of resilience. Hannah cries only once when she realizes the refrigerator is full, and she has not had to choose between milk and gas money. The tears, a confession of exhaustion. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles does not move in. Not at first, not because he does not want to, but because he understands that love built on rescue is unstable. His visit's a quiet offering. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. He brings dinner sometimes, or just sits while Evelyn tells stories about school, his presence a testament to the power of quiet constancy. A man who fixes things that are broken because he wants to be useful, not because he wants to impress anyone. He listens when Hannah talks about the years she spent swallowing humiliation just to stay near her daughter. His silence a confession of complicity. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. One evening, after Evelyn falls asleep on the couch, Hannah stands by the window with her arms folded, her reflection fractured by the city lights. The sight a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. She says softly, "I almost didn't answer the door that first night." Her voice a whisper carried on the weight of the past. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles comes to stand beside her, his presence a quiet offering. A man who understands that some truths are too heavy to carry alone. His voice steady as he says, "I know." The words a verdict on a moment that changed everything. Hannah turns to him, her blonde hair fallen loose around her face. The sight a testament to the woman she has spent years becoming, a woman too beautiful for the life she was asked to live, and too strong to be broken by it. She says, "I thought you were just another man with too much money and not enough honesty." Her voice a blade honed by years of survival, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. Miles meets her accusation with a short smile, his voice measured as he admits, "That was a fair suspicion." The words a confession of a past he is still trying to outrun. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Hannah lifts her chin, her eyes soft but unyielding as she says, "You were watching me." The words a verdict on a truth she has spent years trying to ignore. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles meets her gaze evenly, his voice steady as he says, "Yes," the single word a confession of espionage, a man who came not to observe but to witness the rot festering beneath the surface. Hannah asks, her voice a whisper carried on the weight of the moment, "Why?" The question a plea for a world that makes sense, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. Miles looks at her for a long moment before answering, his silence a pause stretched thin between them. Before he finally says, "Because I kept thinking the world was missing something every time I saw you disappear behind that counter." The words a verdict on a truth he has spent years trying to ignore. The room goes quiet, the weight of his confession settling over them like a shroud, the silence a testament to the power of truth spoken plainly. Then Hannah laughs. Not because it is funny, but because it is honest, the sound a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. She says, "Careful." That almost sounded like a confession, her voice a blade honed by years of survival. A woman who has spent years translating her pain into silence to spare others the burden of her struggle. Miles meets her challenge with a soft smile, his voice steady as he says, "It was." The words a verdict on a truth he can no longer ignore. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Hannah lifts her chin, her eyes soft but unyielding as she says, "Then I suppose you should know I'm still deciding whether I trust you." The words a verdict on a future that is still unwritten, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. Miles meets her hesitation with calm finality. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." The words a testament to the power of quiet constancy, a man who understands that trust is not given. It is earned one quiet act at a time. The next morning, Hannah walks back into the airport in her new role, her posture a testament to the resilience she has spent years forging. A woman who once cleaned broken glass in silence, now carrying a clipboard, a schedule, and the authority to make things better. This time, the lounge staff stands straighter when she passes, their eyes meeting hers without flinching, the change a verdict on a system that has spent years underestimating the power of the powerless. People listen when she speaks, their silence a testament to the authority she carries, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion. This time, the woman who once cleaned broken glass in silence walks through the terminal with her blonde hair catching the light, a princess in ordinary clothes no longer asking the world for permission to exist. Miles watches from the other side of the terminal as she crosses the floor, his chest tight with something he cannot name, the sight a testament to the resilience Hannah has spent years forging. When their eyes meet, he understands that the thing he has never gotten over was not the past. It was the kind of woman who could walk through hell, keep her dignity, and still find room to be kind. He smiles then, small and private, as if the whole world has finally made sense, the expression of verdict on a truth he has spent years trying to ignore. A man who has spent his life untangling lies only to find them woven into the fabric of the system he once thought he controlled. Because sometimes love is not the moment someone saves you, it is the moment they finally see you, the words a verdict on a future that is still unwritten, a woman who has spent years translating her pain into motion.